My name is Nadia Osei-Mensah. I'm 30 years old. I work as a senior financial analyst at Deloitte's Charlotte office, which means I spend my days stress testing other people's numbers, looking for the places where the math doesn't add up. I'm good at it, better than good. My manager, Patricia Hendricks, told me last March that I had an instinct for the lie inside the spreadsheet. I took it as the highest compliment I had ever received. The irony is that I spent the first 26 years of my life unable to see the lie that was right in front of my face, the one that had my name on it, the one that had been growing inside my own family since the day I was born. Let me take you back to a Saturday morning in May 2018. I was 22 years old, and I was standing in the lobby of Halton Arena at UNC Charlotte, holding a rolled-up program, wearing a gown the color of old gold, and my phone was ringing. It was my mother, Diane. "Baby," she said, and I already knew. I knew from the way she said that one word. The same way I had always known, my whole life, when the decision had already been made and I just hadn't been informed yet. "We're not going to make it," she said. "Serena's showcase. It got moved. It's today, right now. Your father and we can't." I don't remember hanging up. I remember standing in the middle of that lobby while families streamed past me. Mothers in church hats, fathers holding cameras, little brothers running figure eights around strangers' legs, and I remember thinking very clearly, very quietly, this is the last time. I didn't know exactly what it was the last time for. I just knew something had ended. I was right. Before we go any further, please like and subscribe, but only if this story is landing somewhere real for you. And drop your location and the time where you are right now in the comments. I want to know who's sitting with me in this today, wherever you are in the world. Now let me tell you who Diane and Robert Osei-Mensah are. Let me tell you who Serena is. And let me tell you who I had to become because of all of them. I grew up in a 3-bedroom house on Pebble Creek Lane in Concord, North Carolina, about 20 miles northeast of Charlotte. My parents bought it in 1995, 2 years before I was born, when my father was 31 and had just been promoted to plant supervisor at Freightliner's manufacturing facility in Cleveland County. My mother was 30 at the time, working as an administrative coordinator at Atrium Health. They were strivers, both of them, first-generation homeowners. The kind of people who kept the living room furniture wrapped in plastic and saved the good china for company that never quite came. My father, Robert, tall, deliberate, with a laugh that came slowly but filled every room it entered, was a man who believed deeply in the dignity of a job done well. My mother, Diane, was sharper, faster, the kind of woman who could manage 5 things at once and make it look like 3. She ran the house the way a general runs a campaign, with total control and a very specific idea of what victory was supposed to look like. I was born in October 1995. My sister Serena came along 22 months later, in August 1997. I want to be careful here because Serena isn't a monster. She never was. She was a little girl who was handed a crown before she could talk, and then spent her entire life trying to live up to it. I understand that now. I did not understand it then. What I understood then was simply that I was not Serena. Serena was beautiful in the way that made strangers stop my mother in grocery stores. Curly hair, deep dimples, a smile that looked like it had been engineered by a committee for maximum impact. At 3 years old, she started dancing at the Carolinas Dance and Set Academy on Church Street in Concord, and by age 6, she was performing in recitals that my parents attended the way other families attend, Sunday services, with reverence, with preparation, with a devotion that left no room for anything else on the calendar. I didn't dance, I read. I did math in my head for fun. I drew maps of countries I wanted to visit. I was the child who stayed quiet at the dinner table and then asked, at 8 years old, what a mortgage was and why ours was at a fixed rate when interest rates were falling. My father laughed and said I was something else. My mother looked at me the way you look at a piece of furniture you bought and then couldn't figure out where to put. She wasn't cruel to me. I want to be precise about this because I've spent enough time in therapy with Dr. Yvonne Lawson at the Charlotte Counseling Center on Park Road to understand the difference between cruelty and neglect. My mother wasn't cruel. She simply looked at Serena and saw the life she'd always imagined, and looked at me and saw something she couldn't quite place. She provided for me, fed me, clothed me, signed every permission slip. She just wasn't ever really watching when I was in the room. My father was warmer, naturally. He'd sit with me sometimes on the back seat after dinner and talk about money, compound interest, the stock market, why his own father had never owned anything, and what that had cost the family. Across generations, he was the one who took me to the Cabarrus County libraries on Saturday mornings while Serena had dance class. Those mornings were the best hours of my childhood. Just us, the wide oak tables, and the particular smell of a Saturday morning. Coffee from the thermos he always carried, the dusty warmth of old books, the way the east light came through the windows, and made everything feel like it could be figured out. But then Serena's recitals started getting bigger. Her studio entered regional competitions. She placed second at the Southeast Youth Dance Championships in Raleigh when she was 12, and after that, everything shifted. The weekends went to Serena. The dinner conversation went to Serena. The money went to Serena, private coaching at $180 an hour, competitions and fees, costumes that sometimes ran $400 each when you added alterations and accessories. I'm not going to tell you I suffered in silence like a saint. I wasn't saintly. I was jealous and 14, and I'd sometimes hate Serena for things that weren't her fault at all. But I was also watching, always watching, and what I was watching was how a family could contain two daughters and really only see one of them. I have to stop here and ask you something, because this is the part of the story that hits differently for people who have lived inside it. Did your parents have a favorite? Not the favorite they named when relatives were listening. The real one. The one you felt in your body every time they looked past you to see if someone better was coming through the door. Leave a comment. Yes, or I thought I was imagining it, or I was the favorite, and I can now see what that cost my sibling. I want to know which seat at that table you were sitting in. I graduated from Concord High School in June 2013 with a 3.94 GPA and a full tuition merit scholarship to UNC Charlotte. The Levine Scholars Program, which was, and still is, one of the most competitive academic scholarships in the state of North Carolina. I had not told my parents I was applying for it. I'd spent a decade watching Freightliner paychecks flow towards Serena's career, and I had made a quiet private decision somewhere in my sophomore year that I would not ask my family for a single dollar toward my education. I would find the money myself. When the acceptance letter arrived, formal white envelope, UNC Charlotte seal, I opened it alone in my bedroom with the door closed. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, full tuition covered, $12,000 per year for 4 years, a $3,500 annual stipend. I had done this by myself. No test prep coach, no application fee paid by someone else, no parent sitting across the kitchen table helping me practice interview answers. I told my parents that night at dinner. My father set down his fork and looked at me with an expression I had not seen in years. The Saturday morning expression, the library expression. "Well, I'll be," he said. I held on to that look afterward, the way you hold on to something you know you won't see again for a while. My mother said, "That's wonderful, baby," and asked Serena to pass the rolls. Serena squeezed my hand under the table and said quietly, "That's huge, Nadia." She meant it. She always meant the good things she said. She just didn't always remember to say them. I left for Charlotte in August 2013, and I did not look back. Finance major at the Belk College of Business, 20 hours a week at the Starbucks on N Tryon Street. Active member of the National Association of Black Accountants Student Chapter. I kept a 3.87 GPA across 4 years of coursework that most of my classmates called brutal. I found it clarifying, the kind of discipline that feels like freedom when you finally understand that no one is coming to hand you anything. I went home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, mostly for my father. We'd sit together after dinner while my mother and Serena settled into the living room with the TV, and he'd ask about my classes, my professors, the internships I was stacking. He still laughed slow. He still filled whatever room he was in. I'd watch him and think, in a different configuration, this man would have been my greatest champion. In this one, he just didn't have enough spine to be anything other than the current that followed wherever my mother's tide went. I graduated in May 2018, cum laude, finance degree with a minor in economics. I had accepted an analyst position at Deloitte the previous October. South Tryon Street, Charlotte, $58,000 annual salary plus full benefits. I had a start date. I had an apartment lined up. I had done everything right. The morning of my graduation, I woke at 6:30 in my apartment on University City Boulevard, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Terrified. Not about the ceremony or the job. About my parents not coming. I knew, on some level, that the risk existed. Serena was 19 and still performing, still competing. The Carolinas Dance Academy held its spring showcase every May. It had always been the first Saturday. Graduation was the second Saturday. I had verified this. I had deliberately verified it. I called my mother Thursday, 2 days out, just to confirm. "We'll be there," she said. "Of course we'll be there." Friday evening, the Arts Council Auditorium on Union Street in Concord had a pipe burst that flooded the backstage area. The showcase was rescheduled to Saturday afternoon. 1 p.m. My ceremony started at 2. My mother called Saturday at 9:45. I was already dressed, already standing in the mirror, looking at myself in old gold. "Baby," she said. I called my father immediately after. He picked up on the second ring. I could hear the car already moving in the background. "Nadia," he said, "I'm sorry. If there were any way—" "Don't," I said. "Don't explain it. We'll celebrate tonight, we can." "Don't," I said again. I walked to my seat in the third row of the floor section, between a woman named Jade Ellison, whose parents had driven from Fayetteville, and a man named Marcus Webb, whose grandmother had flown in from Barbados. I shook the dean's hand at 2:47 p.m. I smiled at the photographer. I walked back to my seat and I held my diploma in both hands and I looked at it for a long time. I want to stop here because I know someone watching this right now has had their own graduation day rewritten on them. Not necessarily this way. Maybe a parent who showed up but looked past you the entire time. Maybe you were the only person in the arena without a sign with your name on it. Tell me what your graduation day actually felt like. Not the version you give when people ask how it went. The real version. Drop it in the comments. I want to know. That night, I bought a bottle of Prosecco from Harris Teeter, drove back to my apartment, and sat on the floor eating takeout from Cabo Fish Taco and drinking out of a coffee mug because my roommate, Camille, had taken the wine glasses when she moved out in March. I didn't cry. I want to be precise about that. I think I had stopped expecting things from my parents long enough ago that I had also stopped being capable of surprise when they didn't come through. What I felt was something more final than sadness. A door, not slamming, simply closing, quietly, firmly, on its own. They called 3 times that night. I didn't answer. My father texted, "We are proud to have you." I mean that. I read it and placed my phone face down on the floor. The next morning I blocked both their numbers. I drove to Concord while they were at church, let myself in with my old key, took the 2 boxes of things I still had there, and left my key on the kitchen counter. I did not leave a note. There wasn't anything to say that the key didn't already say. Deloitte started June 4th, 2018. I was 22. I had $847 in my checking account, and I knew nobody in Charlotte outside of college acquaintances who had all scattered to Atlanta and New York the week after graduation. My manager was a man named Dennis Cho, 44, precise and demanding and fair in equal measure. He handed me my first client file on my second day and said, "You'll probably get it wrong once. That's fine. What's not fine is getting it wrong the same way twice." I respected him immediately. He was the first authority figure in my life who seemed genuinely interested in what I was going to do next. I rented a studio on South Boulevard in the Wilmore neighborhood, $875 a month. I furnished it from IKEA and a sectional I found on Facebook Marketplace, and carried up 3 flights of stairs alone. I worked 50-hour weeks. I read financial modeling textbooks on weekends because I had decided, quietly, privately, with the specific intensity of someone who has been invisible for 20 years and is finally sick of it, to be the best analyst in my cohort within 18 months. The loneliness of that first year is something I don't often mention because it doesn't fit the arc I prefer to tell. But it's true and it's part of this, so I ate dinner alone most nights that first year. I didn't know where to go on a Friday in a city where I knew no one. I cried twice, that I remember clearly, once in October 2018, watching a mother and daughter having brunch at Amelie's on South Boulevard, the daughter laughing with her mouth full, the mother looking at her like she'd personally arranged the sun. And once on Thanksgiving, alone in my apartment with a rotisserie chicken from Harris Teeter and the Macy's parade on TV, the volume set just loud enough to fill the room. But lonely is not the same as lost. I want to be clear about that. I knew exactly where I was going. I could see it in my performance reviews, in the harder clients Dennis kept assigning me, in the way my checking account grew from $847 to $12,000 to $31,000 over 18 months. I was building something. I could feel it setting under my hands the way a structure sets, slow, cellular, stronger with every week that passed. The first person who broke through was a woman named Tamara Oduya. She was 31, a graphic designer at a firm on East Trade Street, and I met her at a Saturday morning yoga class at a studio called Elevate on East Boulevard in November 2018. She had a laugh like a brass bell and opinions about everything, and she invited me to Thanksgiving at her mother's house in Gastonia 2 weeks after we met. And I sat at a table with 14 people who argued over football and passed sweet potato pie, and didn't care at all that I was brand new to all of them. I cried on the drive home. That time, it was something entirely different. Tamara is still my best friend. She was my maid of honor in 2022. She is still the first person I call when anything good or terrible happens. There are people you lose and people you find, and the people you find often love you more fiercely than the ones who were supposed to love you first, because they chose you from scratch. They walked into your quiet and decided to stay. Tell me, when you were rebuilding, who was the first person who actually showed up for you? Not the one who texted, "Let me know if you need anything," and then went quiet. The one who actually showed up physically, with their time or their table or their Saturday morning. Name them in the comments. They deserve to be named. Dennis promoted me to senior analyst in January 2021, 2.5 years ahead of the standard progression. I was 25. My salary moved to $87,000. He brought me into his office and said, "I want you on the Meridian Capital account. It's the most complicated client we carry. I think you're ready." He was right. I was. I met my husband, Calvin Trent, in March of that year at a Deloitte client appreciation event at the Ritz-Carlton on East Trade Street. He was 32, a civil engineer at Kimley Horn, and he walked up to the bar where I was standing and said, "I have no idea what half the people here are talking about, but I was told there's good cheese somewhere on this floor." I told him the cheese was by the window and that I didn't know half the people here either. We talked for 3 hours. He texted me the next morning at 7:52 a.m. and asked if I wanted coffee. We got married in September 2022 at the Ballantine Hotel in South Charlotte. 72 degrees late afternoon amber light across the ceremony lawn. Tamara stood beside me. Calvin's parents, Renee and James Trent from Greensboro, sat front row. Dennis and his wife Angela were there. Jade, from graduation day, was there. She had driven up from Fayetteville, and she hugged me before the ceremony for a long moment without saying anything, which was exactly the right thing to do. My parents were not invited. Serena was not invited. I had not spoken to either of my parents in 4 years. They had not reached out after my graduation night calls went unanswered. My father had tried once in the summer of 2019, mailed a 2-page handwritten letter to my South Boulevard apartment, careful slow print. the kind of handwriting that takes effort. He said he was sorry about graduation day. He said he had wanted to come and should have pushed harder. He said he thought about me. He did not say my mother was sorry. He did not say anything would be different. I read that letter 4 times, kept it in my nightstand drawer for 3 months, then mailed it back unopened, note, not to wound him. Because I had finally understood that a man who was sorry but unwilling to change anything was still, in every way that mattered, a man who would leave you standing in a lobby alone. I kept his letter, though. I don't fully know why. Maybe because he was the one who brought me to the library on Saturday mornings. Maybe because I have never been able to cleanly separate the man who loved me from the man who wasn't enough. Maybe that's just what it means to love a parent, the two things living in the same space, neither one canceling the other out. It was a Thursday morning in April 2022, 3 weeks before my wedding, when I looked up from my desk and the world rearranged itself. I was reviewing the quarterly filings for a new client that had just been assigned to my team. The intake file sat at the corner of my desk in the standard manila folder, black ink on the tab, the way hundreds of files had sat at the corner of my desk before it. The name on the tab read, Osei-Mensah, Diane and Robert. I sat very still for a moment. I could hear the HVAC system. I could hear Kyle at the next workstation asking someone about lunch. I could smell the coffee burning slightly in the carafe by the window. The fluorescent lights hummed at their constant, indifferent frequency. I opened the file. My parents were $134,000 in debt. They had co-signed 4 of Serena's Crescentic student loans through Silly Mae. She had enrolled in 2018 at the American Musical and Dramatic Academy in New York City. Tuition running $34,000 a year, and had dropped out after 2 semesters. There were 2 vehicle loans, a $23,000 home equity line for an HVAC replacement, outstanding credit card balances across 3 accounts totaling $41,600. My father had been laid off from Freightliner in the summer of 2021, an automation-driven reduction that cut most of the senior plant supervisors in his facility. He had not found work since. My mother had taken early retirement from Atrium Health in 2020. Their combined monthly income was now my father's $2,100 Social Security and my mother's $1,340 pension. They were drowning, and they had come to a financial consulting firm for help. And that firm was Deloitte, and the senior analyst assigned to their file was me. I closed the folder. I sat back in my chair. The Charlotte skyline was in the window beyond my desk, mid-morning light laying silver across the glass towers, and I thought, this is the moment where I decide who I am, not who they made me, not who they overlooked, who I actually am. I called Dennis on the internal line and told him I had a conflict of interest with the new Osei-Mensah account and needed to be recused. He said that was no problem, and he'd reassign it. He didn't ask for an explanation. That's the thing about people who are genuinely good. They don't require you to bleed out loud. That night, I drove home to our Dilworth condo on East Boulevard. Calvin and I had bought it in February, a 2-bedroom with original hardwood floors, and a kitchen that caught the morning light in a way that still stops me sometimes. And I sat at the kitchen table and told Calvin everything: library Saturday mornings, the rolled-up program, the lobby, the file. Calvin listened the way some people run, like his body was built for exactly this. He didn't say, family is family. He didn't say you should forgive them. He said, what do you need? I said, I don't know yet, he said. Okay, I'll be here when you figure it out. I didn't figure it out for 2 more months. They showed up in June 2022, a Saturday afternoon. 91 degrees, the kind of Charlotte June heat that comes off the pavement in waves. I was in the back courtyard of our building watering the herbs I'd put in terracotta pots along the fence. Rosemary, basil, one extremely ambitious attempt at lavender. The front door buzzer rang. I went inside and intercom. Nadia, my mother's voice, smaller than I remembered it somehow, like something had gone out of it. I stood at the intercom panel with one hand still damp from the garden hose. and I felt the full weight of every choice I had ever made pressing down on the single decision of what came next. I buzzed them in. They looked older. Of course they did. 4 years is 4 years. And some of those years had clearly pressed down harder than others. My mother was 56 and had the posture of a woman who had been carrying something heavy for long enough that the weight had become visible. My father was 59 and had lost enough weight that his collared shirt sat differently on him. He was holding a peace lily in a white plastic pot, the kind Harris Teeter sells near the checkout for $14.99, and he was holding it with both hands like he didn't know what else to do with them. We sat in my living room, my mother and father side by side on the couch, me across from them in the armchair, back straight, hands folded, not going to cry and not going to fill their silence for them. That was something therapy had given me, the ability to let silence sit without rushing in to end it. My mother spoke first. "We know we don't deserve to be here." I said nothing. "I need to say some things to you, Nadia, things I should have said a long time ago." My father set the peace lily on my coffee table. The afternoon sun was cutting long diagonals across my hardwood floors. There was basil on my kitchen windowsill. I had built this entire life, this specific, beautiful, carefully constructed life, out of a single merit scholarship and $847 and the stubborn refusal to stay invisible. My mother looked at her hands. "I don't have an explanation that makes it right." "I know that. I've known it." She looked up. Her eyes were red at the edges, but she was holding herself together. "We missed your graduation. Your father wanted to come. I was the one who decided. I made that choice, not him." My father looked at the floor. "I made that choice," she said again, "and I've been paying for it in ways I can't fully describe. I kept waiting for the right time to say it, and then the right time kept moving further away." She paused. "I need you to know it was mine. That decision was mine." It was the first truly honest thing I could remember my mother saying to me in 30 years. I didn't say it was okay. I didn't say I forgave her. I said, "Why are you here now?" she said. "Because Serena told us to come. I hadn't expected that." She said she had taken up more than her share for a long time, that you deserved better. She'd been saying it for a couple of years, actually. My mother's voice cracked slightly and then steadied. We just finally listened. And this is the question I want to leave you with right now, because I've sat with it for 2 years, and I still don't have a clean answer. When the people who hurt you finally come to your door, do you open it? Not do you pretend everything is fine, not do you hand them forgiveness like it costs you nothing, but do you open the door and find out what, if anything, is still there? I genuinely don't know if there's a right answer. I know what I chose. What would you have done? If they came knocking after years of silence, would you open the door, close it, or something in between? Tell me in the comments. I did not invite them to my wedding. That boundary I held completely. Calvin and I had built that day over 8 months, and it belonged to us and the people who had been present through the actual years. Tamara, Dennis, and Angela, Jade, Calvin's family, our friends. I was not willing to turn that day into the backdrop for a complicated family reckoning. That Saturday in September was going to be clean. And it was. But I did not close the door either. After they left that June afternoon, I called Dr. Yvonne Lawson. I had been seeing her on and off since 2020. She practiced at the Charlotte Counseling Center on Park Road, a small suite with waiting room chairs, the specific shade of sage green that makes you feel irrationally, like things are going to be okay. Yvonne was 51, precise and warm in exact proportion, and she had the gift of asking the right question at the exact moment you thought you had already figured something out. I told her everything: the file on my desk, the buzzer, my mother's hands, the peace lily still sitting on my coffee table when I called. Yvonne said, "What do you want to do with this?" I said, "I don't want to go back to pretending the damage didn't happen." That's not what I asked. I was quiet for a moment. "I think I want to know if there's something that could still be built. Not what we were. Not the family I grew up in. Something different. Built on an honest foundation instead of whatever that was." Yvonne said, "That sounds like a long, slow project," I said. I know. I'm not sure I'm ready to take it on, she said. You don't have to decide today. I didn't, but I also didn't close the door. I met my parents for dinner in July 2022, 3 months after they'd showed up, 6 weeks before the wedding. Calvin came. We went to 300 East on East Boulevard, my neighborhood, my city, my table. My mother ordered the salmon. My father had the chicken. Calvin talked to my father about the Freightliner layoffs and the job market for plant supervisors and the bridge rehabilitation project he was working on along I-485. And my father listened with the careful, grateful attention of a man who was relieved to be treated like a person. Midway through dinner, my mother looked around the restaurant, at the warm lighting, the neighborhood crowd, the easy confidence with which I had chosen this place, and said, "Your home feels like you in it, the herbs on the windowsill. The way everything is arranged, it feels like you made it," I said. "I did." She nodded slowly. "I know," she said. "I know you did." That was the closest she had ever come to seeing me. I let myself feel it. I didn't say it was enough. It wasn't enough. But it was real, and it was hers, and I let myself feel it. My parents are in my life now. I want to be precise about what that looks like, because it is not a Hallmark movie. It is dinner 6 or 8 times a year. Phone calls every week or two with my mother, short calls, careful ones, the kind where you are still learning how to be with each other without the old patterns rushing in. My father and I text. He asks about work, I ask about his. He got a part-time consulting position at a manufacturing trade organization in Charlotte last fall. And when he called to tell me, he sounded like himself again, the slow laugh, the filling of the room. I sat at my kitchen table and let myself be glad for it. Serena, I have to tell you about Serena. She had a hard few years in New York and then harder ones back in Concord, a story that is entirely hers to tell, not mine. She lives in Raleigh now. She works as a fitness instructor and part-time dance coach for kids at Raleigh Parks and Recreation. She called me out of nowhere in March 2021 and said, "I want to be in your life, Nadia." Not the way I was before, actually in it, if you'll let me. We talk every week. She is not the sister who got the cookies and the costumes and the $180 private coaching sessions. She is someone I'm still learning. Someone who knows the cost of the crown she was given, and who has spent the last several years quietly, consistently putting it down. She is, I think, the most honest member of my family. She got there through the hardest possible road, but she got there. The financial situation, my parents' debt, the restructuring plan, was handled entirely by my colleague, Marcus Findley, who worked out a repayment structure over 18 months. I did not interfere. I did not step in to fix it for them. That part was not mine to carry. They are managing. My mother went back to part-time work as a medical records coordinator at Atrium Health last spring. They are not my responsibility. But they are, carefully, tentatively, honestly, my family again. I'm sitting at my kitchen table in Dilworth right now. It's 7:15 in the morning. The basil on the windowsill is 3 inches taller than it should be, and I've been meaning to trim it for a week. Calvin is in the shower. I have a client review call in 15 minutes that I need to pull up. My UNC Charlotte diploma is on the table in front of me. I took it off the office wall last week to rearrange the room, and it has been sitting here every morning since, waiting to go back up. I look at it every day when I have my coffee. It says, Nadia Osei-Mensah, Bachelor of Science in Finance, conferred May 12, 2018. With distinction, I walked that stage alone. There was no sign with my name on it in the stands. There was no photographer waiting for me afterward. I shook the dean's hand and walked back to my seat and sat with my diploma and felt the full weight of what I had done without anyone watching. I think sometimes about the woman who stood in that lobby holding a program while families moved past her. I think about what I would say to her now, if I could. I think I would say, you are about to find out what you are made of in the specific way that only happens when the people who were supposed to show up don't. You are going to be alone for a while. You are going to carry things alone, and you will discover slowly that the carrying is not the worst thing that has ever happened to you. It is, in some ways, the best. Because what you build alone is entirely yours. No one can take it from you. No one can say they gave it to you. It is yours from the foundation up, every beam and every window, yours. I don't carry anger about graduation day anymore. I'm not sure I carry grief about it in the way I once did, either. What I carry now is the knowledge of what I built in the years of silence. The Wilsmore studio, the 50-hour weeks, Dennis's office, the condo on East Boulevard, Tamara's laugh on the phone, Calvin, at the table asking what I need. Everything I have, I built. And the building of it is the story, not the lobby, not the rolled-up program, not the Prosecco in the coffee mug. That doesn't mean what happened was acceptable. It wasn't. My mother knew it and finally said so. My father knew it and showed up with a piece lily in empty hands, which was the most honest thing he had done in 30 years. The admission was not enough, but it was something. And sometimes something offered genuinely is where you start. They don't tell you, when they talk about healing, that sometimes healing looks like building a whole life without the people who hurt you, and then turning around and deciding, on your terms, at your table, in your time, what they get to see of it, that the choice is yours, the life is yours. No one can take what you built while they weren't watching. No one can take the morning light in your kitchen, or the herbs on your windowsill, or the diploma on your table. No one can take who you became in the years they looked away. If any part of this story found you, if you know what it is to hold a rolled-up program alone, or to eat a Harris Teeter chicken in front of a Thanksgiving parade, or to build something in the dark, while your family was somewhere else watching someone else, I want to hear from you. If they came to your door, what would you have done? What did you do? Leave it in the comments. And if you want more stories like this one, everything you need is in the description.